Omakase. Although it is in the American dictionary, it is, of course, a term of Japanese origin. It translates directly to I leave it up to you. Omakase is a request that one makes to a chef, usually in an establishment with an open kitchen or a bar or somewhere where you can sit down and watch the chef work. It is a different way to order food. Instead of just picking items out of a menu, you walk to the bar or wherever the open kitchen is, and you make the request to the chef. Omakase shimasu. I leave it up to you. And instead of just making the items on the menu, the chef will make you a set of courses, usually with the freshest ingredients, and in turn make a presentation, almost a performance of their own unique creativity, the best they could make you. When cost is of no concern, and you, the patron, has an open mind, the chef is free to do as they see fit, and create the most unique expression of their own creativity. Now you may be wondering, what does Japanese cuisine have to do with writing? In my case, it has everything to do with writing. A few years back, I was introduced to the term omakase through Derek Yu's book, Spelunky. In that book, Derek Yu talked about his experience, the highs and lows of designing, publishing, remaking, and re-releasing the 2008 roguelike video game of the same name. In the chapter on game design, Derek Yu talked about omakase and what it meant to him as a game designer. He talked about how the creation of a Spelunky wasn't about creating a game set for success, a game that everyone was meant to enjoy, a game that was created from its inception to make money. Instead, Derek's approach to game design was one that was intimate and personal. He loved the idea of omakase, the idea that someone would walk up to you being the chef and them the patron. They would tap on the bar and say, omakase shimasu. And then, without having to worry about the menu, about the person's taste, about the ingredients at hand, or the cost, you had the ability, the chance, to create something that was uniquely yours, and an expression of who you are as a chef, as a game designer, as a writer. I had a special moment reading that part of the book. I had that sort of moment when, and this happens in writing all the time, when someone puts to words something that you had felt your entire life, but you had never been able to describe. Omakase had been my approach to storytelling and to writing advice for years. I never set out with the desire to create the sort of story that everyone would like. A story that would be a bestseller. A story that would explode and become a multimedia franchise. My job, always, has been to give you a fun story. An interesting story. Because fun doesn't always equal happy. I love the idea of someone walking up to the bar and saying, Max, I leave it up to you. If you could tell any story, if you could do anything, what would you do? That's been my approach. For years, I've been doing things just like that. My approach to telling stories, and my approach to doing writing advice. Those of you who have been following me forever will know that. I have never sold my advice as anything other than my point of view, my experience, and what worked for me. I thought long and hard about what I wanted this podcast to be called, this glimpse into my creative process, my life, and my way of telling stories. I thought about it a lot, and I realized that I didn't want it to be a funny title, or a catchy title, or even something with my name on it. I wanted it to be a part of my process. I thought about all of those books of writing advice, and I found myself stumbling back on the memory of a book not about writing, not about telling stories, but about making games. Spelunky by Derek Yu. And my introduction to what Omakase meant. My mission here is not to give you the best writing advice podcast in the world, or the most successful, or the one that is bound to explode into a multimedia franchise. My job is to imagine that you are the person walking into the restaurant. You tap on the bar, and you say, "Max, I leave it up to you." Not worrying about resources or time or the success that may come or not come. If I could make a podcast about myself, my stories, my way of writing, if I could make anything, I would make it this. Omakase. The life and writing of author M. Karen. If this is our first time meeting each other, let me give you a quick introduction. My name is Max, also known as M. Karen. I have been creating writing advice videos and posts for half a decade now. It doesn't feel anywhere near as long. I write books for a living, I take my coffee black, I always eat my veggies first, I always order the combination tempura, my pronouns are they, them, and yes, I have a son. He is gray, he is a Russian blue, and yes, he is the happiest boy in the whole world. And, of course, welcome to the first episode and the pilot of my writing advice podcast. This has been a long journey for me, and I am both terrified and excited. This is something that I've been wanting to do forever, and to those of you who have been following me forever, thank you. This will not be different from the things you already love. My podcast is an amalgamation of what I love, of the things I do, of the things that I have always been doing. Throughout this podcast, I will tell you about my own process, what I have been doing. I'm going to answer viewer questions like I've always done. And at the end, I will leave you with a writing exercise, a story idea, or just an interesting prompt that came to mind. Now, before we begin the show in proper, there's one more thing I have to say. And that is that I would like to ask for your feedback on this first episode. Once you're done, please feel free to go into the YouTube comments and let me know what you would like to see changed, what you really liked about it, and what you really didn't like about it. I need your feedback, especially because this might be a long-term thing because of some personal changes that I have in my life. And honestly, because of other YouTube changes, I just really been wanting to make a podcast where I am free to not speak really, really fast, and I can just clearly state what I feel without having to worry about how many people click away from the video halfway in. That's the business side of things. That's the production side of things. And again, this whole podcast is here so that I don't have to worry about those things, so that I don't have to worry about clicks and ad revenue, and instead just create the best podcast that I could make. So if you could take just a minute to give me your feedback, it would mean the world to me. But now, let's begin the show in proper. My podcast is broken into 3 segments. My update, especially the update on my writing journey. I've been writing every day for a long time. I'm going to tell you my own personal update on that. Afterwards, we're going to tackle a couple of viewer questions, and then a nice inspirational moment, a prompt or a story idea. This time around, it is not so much a story idea, but rather a story hook. So we'll see what kind of stories you can spin from that. Also, for anyone who's wondering, my ultimate goal with this podcast will be to have it go up on iTunes and Google Play and all the usual places. But it will also continue to go up on YouTube. So wherever you want to listen to it, trust me, there will be a place and you will be able to download them however you like. That stuff's not changing. If anything, it's only going to get better. But now, with that note from my list of things to talk about out of the way, let's talk about my week. It's been actually a couple of weeks since the last time I made a video. None of you noticed because I'm really good at recording stuff in advance. But I recently went to a convention. I went to Fanime in San Jose, California. And that convention is always a blast. It grows every year. It was 3.5 days of being on my feet, walking everywhere, and buying way too much merch. It was very fun, and it's always a delight. I always look forward to Fanime. I always dread it a little bit, mostly because I have to work. I really have to work ahead. I have to make a bunch of videos in advance. But the convention is always fun. It's a nice time to just relax, take it slow, sleep in. That's not true. I always wake up early. I have to. It's part of how I do things. The special thing with this year's convention was that I have been writing every day. I have been doing daily writing. As of the recording of this podcast, I have been writing every day for 43 days. And in case you're wondering, yes, I wrote even while I was at the convention. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, because our hotel room was really nice and had a desk and a nice chair. So thankfully, I was able to follow up on my routine. I didn't have as long writing sessions as I usually do, mostly because of time constraints. And also because, it is supposed to be a vacation. So I took it a little bit slow, just like half. I think I did 1/4 session, but I kept going and I did not break the chain. It's been a really fun journey. It's come to the point now, and I talk about it on Twitter too. I really like the way that I've been doing daily writing, always tweeting about it, always doing the update, doing it even if it's a 1/4 session, a half session, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, it doesn't matter. Regardless of how much time I have to write, I write every day. And it's been great because I'm at 43 days. And I've been doing it for long enough that if I stop, which I can't, which I won't allow myself to, but if I was to stop, I know so many friends who would kick my butt, and that's good. It's good. Peer pressure is one fantastic way to achieve things. That's what I used to say back in the day when I used to organize NaNoWriMo events. Nothing official, but it was just we and my friends and my writing groups, and I would organize that. And I would say that, like with your writing friends and giving each other updates. Peer pressure, it's a great way to achieve things. But yeah, getting back to the convention, it was really fun. It was a delightful time. I bought way too much merch at Artist Alley, where all of the artists set up the stands and sell tons of merch. Kitty, my partner, is trying to get me to make a Señora Ida bag, and I am not allowed to do that. But I will. And I feel like I have to explain, because in a video would just show you or have a little description. Señora is a character from the video game Overwatch. I don't play that game much anymore, but I really do like that character. I like that character, and I hate how little story he has. But in spite of that, I'm saying it with such restrained anger. Keep an eye out for the day when I have Michael Chu on the show. That's never gonna happen. Mostly because it would involve, 2.5 hours of me yelling at him, why doesn't Señora have any lore? Anyhow, an Ida bag, in case you're wondering what that is, an Ida bag is a Japanese trend of backpacks with clear faces or fronts. and like a little insert where you can put pins and charms. You usually fill it up with your favorite character. It's a thing. It's a thing you do to show how much you care about a particular character, and this happens every year. Like every year, there's more and more Overwatch merch and Overwatch stuff at Artist Alley, and I see all the Zenyatta pins and charms, and I'm like, I could do it this year, and then I don't. But I bought a few of them, so I guess the bag has officially begun. As for things that I've been consuming, because yes, I've been writing. The story that I'm working on is moving along. It's a really long book. I might talk a little bit more about it, but what have I been consuming? Because as creators, as writers, as people who make things, we have to also consume things. And I'm gonna be really restrained. I'm gonna hold back and not scream for 45 minutes about Detroit Become Human because I could. Kitty and I scream at each other about Detroit Become Human on our other channel for approximately 2 hours. We did the editor thing, going through the first 2 hours of the game, pointing out all the inconsistencies because we hate ourselves. No, it's David Cage's writing is very inconsistent, and I'm not gonna talk about it on this show because I like to stay positive, and I don't really want to spend, half an hour talking about things such as like why are there scissors in the hotel room, David? Also, those scissors were not there in the scene prior. Where did those scissors come from, David? Anyhow, I would like to inspire you to edit your writing mercilessly, to always question the things you write, and to always seek to tell the best story possible. No matter how hard it seems, no matter how much you want to pull your hair out, you have to commit to a story and tell it good. Not like David Cage. Okay, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm so bad. The other thing that Kitty and I watched, we finally sat down. We are terrible at watching movies. We are really bad. We take forever. We have a pile. It is almost as big as my to-read pile of movies that we bought, and we promised ourselves that we would not buy any more until we watched the ones we have. Of course, those were all lies. But this weekend, we sat down and we finally watched Spider-Man Homecoming, which I had never seen, and neither had she. And I came in not knowing what to expect. And I came out mildly surprised. The movie is relatively simple. I mean, I'm not coming out of it with huge writing revelations, but there were things that I really enjoyed. Primarily in the presentation of Peter Parker as a character, having grown up with Tobey Maguire. Is it Tobey Maguire? I think so. Having grown up with that version of Spider-Man that never really felt like the nerd Peter Parker was always supposed to be. It was really nice seeing your kind of socially awkward, really awkward Peter Parker in Spider-Man Homecoming. And the other really good writing bit that I liked was the twist regarding our antagonist and the relation between them and our main character. And I liked, just as a writing thing, I really liked the parallel between Spider-Man's theme, which has always been family, and how the Vulture's theme was also family. I actually really like that. It's a sort of subtle thing that you don't notice, because in writing, when things are going really well, you don't notice it. You don't stop to question things. That's why in David Cage stories, you're stopping every 5 minutes, because you're like, wait a minute, David, why is that happening? Okay, enough with that. Enough with that. I promised myself, and I promised Kitty, that I would leave all of the David Cage rambling to our other channel. Now, what am I looking forward to? This next week, I have a lot of writing ahead of me, and I have a couple of really scary things happening. Nothing life-threatening, it's just big, scary adult things. And it's the sort of thing where I can tell, because I know myself very well, and I can tell that I'm trying to procrastinate. I am putting them aside, and every time I recognize myself doing that, because again, like, I know myself and I'm level-headed enough to know when I'm doing something wrong, and every time I get that feeling, I immediately just grab the thing that scares me and I just do it. So I have a lot of those days coming up, a lot of personal things, nothing too scary, If I can just light this in, because some of you may be wondering, why a podcast, why now? And it's a combination of things. First off, I'm actually a little sick. I don't know if you can tell. I caught the con flu coming back from Fanime, and I was really sick. I still wrote. I still wrote because I'm crazy that way, but I did it. But I am coming out of it. I'm still pretty sick, and I didn't want to skip on videos. Alternatively, summer is almost here, and I live in California, so that's why keep an eye out for when my Twitter handle changes to just flame emojis. Heat is really bad. I hate the middle of summer. I think I have gone on hiatus like 2 summers in the last 5 years because it gets so hot and it's just so hard to record videos, especially when you want a natural light. So between being sick and being in no condition to be in front of the camera because of the heat, I thought, well, I've been wanting to do a podcast. Why not just do the pilot now? Why not? Try it for a couple of weeks. If people really like it, I can get going to the next step, which is, of course, doing hosting, putting it up on iTunes. Why not? I mean, the options were not make anything or make this. And this was exciting, so I chose to do the exciting thing instead. And now a little bit of housekeeping. The housekeeping segment of the show. Videos will still happen on the channel. We have a really good Patreon video going up. Or I guess it's going public. And then a new one's going to be going up to Patreon. I have a really exciting video. It's a workshop. It's a primer on writing a particular kind of character. And I'm excited for that to go public. Maybe it might even already be public by the time this goes up. We'll see. By the way, anyone who's wondering, no, I did not coordinate that. Sometimes things just work out. While we're on the subject of Patreon, let's talk about the sponsors. This here is the segment of the show in which I tell you about the people who are making this show possible. Not only this show, but also the rest of my content and my books. In case you don't know, I have a Patreon account. Patreon.com/amkaren is the place you can go and support me and get cool rewards along the way. You can pledge just $1 a month and get to watch all of my videos and get access to these podcasts a week before they go live on YouTube. There's even an RSS feed, so if you want, you can just synchronize with your podcast apps and not even have to go on Patreon to download the episodes. And of course, you can also get cool perks like getting a shout out in these videos. In case you're wondering, all my patrons get a shout out, just where it goes up depends on your pledge. Today, I want to give a big thank you and an enormous greeting to my first super sponsor, and I'm going to butcher your name, Atlak. Thank you so much for your support, Atlak. You literally just pledged today, and you haven't gotten back to me, but I will add your custom URL on the next episode. And of course, I would like to give a big shout out to the rest of the sponsors, Howard, Amelia, Angela, Brenda, Harriet H, Irina Phoenix, Joe, Luki, Mark Maruska, Nicola, Pat Eichson, whose name I apparently had been butchering for over 6 months, Rain Misoa, Soul Muse, and Synexia. In case you're wondering, by the way, yes, all of the patrons are gonna get a shout out at the end of the video. It's just the sponsors and the super sponsors get to be in the middle of the video. Oh wow, this all feels so professional. It feels like it's actually a podcast. In spite of me yelling about Senora, I somehow managed to work Senora and David Cage yelling about David Cage in the first episode of my podcast. That is hilarious. But now, I gave you my update, I told you about the sponsors, and now let's talk about the questions. Today, I have 2 questions coming from viewers just like you. I'm just taking them off the YouTube comments, and here we go. We have a question about cliches and a question about being an anonymous writer. And here it is. The day's come. It's time for me to, in the most controlled manner possible, talk about cliches. Actually, no, rewind, take it back. Before we jump there, there's one thing that I forgot to mention in an earlier part of the podcast, and that is, Max, why are you speaking so slowly? And I'm not forcing myself to speak slowly. I am being careful with what I say, and I'm being mindful of what I say. Not because I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's because the environment that YouTube created for me as a content creator inspired me. No. Let's just say pushed me into creating shorter content because people watch shorter videos. And I do realize, because I edit the videos, I hear myself. I trust me, I'm the first person who watches the videos. I know that I speak really fast sometimes. And honestly, I live my life in a hurry. I'm always running everywhere, always running somewhere, doing something. And I want these podcasts to be a chance for me to sit down and just talk. Just talk. I know that a bunch of you were saying that you really liked it when I just rambled on videos, and I think rambling is not exactly the correct word. I think if I had to change it, I would say speaking freely, without having to worry about time. I edited my videos a lot recently, and it's not inherently a bad thing. I like being brief sometimes, especially when just answering a question. But I also really like just going off on tangents and tackling different angles to a question. Not so much devil's advocate, but rather looking at things from different points of view. Because ultimately, the advice that I'm going to give you, and yes, I am bringing this back because people asked for it, the following advice is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel. Instead, take it as the advice of a silly person who sounds a little bit like this. Also, in case you're wondering, yes, the slowpoke is in the podcast. It's very quiet. I actually have both slowpokes. Those who watch my videos know that I love the Pokemon Slowpoke. It's me. It's actually me. I was joking about calling this the Slowpoke Writer podcast, and Kitty looked at me and said, "Can you do that?" And I think I said no. There's no way I can do that. Nintendo would sue me so fast. Nintendo would sue me so fast. You guys would not even get to watch the video. But anyhow, the reason why I'm speaking a little bit more carefully and just taking it easy is because ultimately I want this to feel like a real conversation and not so much Max is trying to get the video to be less than 10 minutes and failing. So there's that. That's why I'm being a little bit more methodical with how I speak. Hopefully you like it. And if it's too slow for you, I mean, YouTube has a feature that you can just speed up videos. And most podcast apps have that too. So there's that. With that out of the way, let the rambling begin. This first question I'm getting, and let me actually bring it up. It's about cliches. The question goes a little bit like this, Max said, reaching for their phone, buying time, continuing to speak as though holding a combo in a fighting video game, and the question found it. There you go. I need help in regards of cliches. When to avoid them and when to utilize them. How do you know the difference? How can you twist the cliches into something cool? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Oh, they called me a rock star. That's cute. I'm not a rock star though. I am definitely not a rock star. And I actually like it that way. We're going to touch more on that on the next question. But first, here we go. Let's do it. Let's talk about cliches. Cliches. Or cliches. I don't know. It's a French word, isn't it? Of course it's a French word. Tropes. How can we, as writers, utilize them? Should we even look at them? The answer is no. Should we use them in our writing? Should we analyze them? Should we bookmark tvtropes.com in our bookmarks toolbar? The answer is no. Why has that always been my stance? Because when I say that hate is a really strong word, but let's say I hate tropes. I don't mean that I hate tropes, because tropes are ultimately patterns that people find in, a wide medium. But what I dislike is how mechanical the process of analyzing and looking at tropes is. And I've always felt that tropes and cliches are a thing external to the writing. It is people who don't write, people who consume stories, find those patterns, not so much the people who write stories. And I feel that when you try to use them for writing, you end up having more troubles, or it hurts you more than it helps you. I find that this is really close to the hero's journey. That particular system, wink wink system, or it was originally made to analyze old fiction, mythology, Greek mythology, and all those great tales. It was made to analyze them. I forget the man's name, forgive me. Made that after analyzing countless stories and finding a certain pattern to them. The hero's journey is a tool for analyzing fiction and nothing else. And in spite of that, I know, because my English teachers in high school told me that it was a way, a tool, a guide to how to tell stories. And I can't begin to describe how much I disagree with that now, and I can't begin to express how much I hate it. That's not true. It's just a system, and it's being misused to begin with. But throughout my entire years, running a blog and doing a YouTube channel, I've gotten countless questions about people who feel as though their stories are doomed to fail because they don't have an oracle, or because their story does not have a descent into the underworld and a return to the world of normality and the mundane, which of course are points in the hero's journey. The reason why I have always disliked the hero's journey when used as a writing guide is because it turns the unlimited potentials of the writing process, where you can create whatever you want without rules and be able to express yourself fully, it boils that down into an equation, into a system of checklists. Your hero does this, then they do that, then they do that, then they do that. And that is not very exciting. As someone who writes very weird stories and loves writing weird stories, I can't begin to describe how unfun that sort of process is. Like back in college, because I took a lot of creative writing courses in college, like people would hold that like a rule, man, and that was just so bad. It'd be, I would get feedback like, your character has to descend into the underworld, and I'm like, why? Why does my character have to descend into the underworld, So you could say that I've been predisposed to not like situations like that, mostly because of my experiences. Now, as you can imagine, the reason why I dislike tropes and cliches, especially when they're applied to writing, is because they turn writing into a system of checklists, a system of filling in the blanks, Mad Libs, basically. And not only that, but there are some extensions to cliches that immediately negate your story or override context for merely content. Because this happens in your story, therefore it's this trope and it's bad, without considering the context for why things are happening and why things are the way they are. Now, I'm not about to overlook the fact that some cliches and some tropes are actually harmful, and they continue to prolong antiquated beliefs. A couple of the harmful stereotypes that I can name off the top of my head, of course, bury your gays. Because gay people can't survive a story. They must die for the character development of someone else, usually the protagonist. I dislike that for very personal reasons, clearly. And there's, of course, the maiden in distress that continues to prolong the antiquated belief that women are objects to be won, saved, and then kept. All of those things are actually harmful. But in spite of that, I don't particularly think you have to read through the entirety of TV tropes to not fall into those pitfalls. I think that consuming a lot of media, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, seeing what makes you feel uncomfortable, and being aware of what makes others uncomfortable, just being open-minded and mindful of other things, I feel like that's a better way to live your life than better check TV tropes to make sure that I'm not saying anything offensive. I think being open-minded and being mindful of other people, and of course, the one thing that I always bring up is that feedback is very important. And I mentioned this in the video that's gonna go up next week, I think. But if you're ever writing a minority character and you want to know if you nailed it, you should send your book to someone of that group. You should actually reach to someone and get their thoughts on it and ask if you said anything that you couldn't have realized, because it is true that sometimes it's hard to see things outside of your own spectrum of life, and that's fair. But that's why feedback is important, and that's why it's good to reach out to different kinds of people. But in spite of that, I've done nothing but ramble about cliches, which is exactly what you signed up for. I dislike them because they become patterns, and our human brains are fantastic. It is the thing that I long for the day where a sci-fi story or a sci-fi video game comes up, and when you go to character creation, humans have an ability, a skill that no one else in the entire universe has. We are amazing at finding patterns. I dislike it. If you're wondering, does Max like the idea that in video games humans are basically jacks of all trades? I despise that. Now that I can say easily. My approach to pen and paper role-playing games, my approach to anything has been to never be a jack of all trades, never be good at everything, be good at one thing. Because I feel like that adds to a lot more drama, especially in role-playing games. That's why, if I'm sitting at your table, I'm gonna play the best thief. Oh, I love playing thieves. Mostly because I'm a terrible person, but in spite of that, would I steal from other players? Maybe. But don't worry about that. This is not a pen and paper role-playing podcast, but it could be. It could be. Keep an eye out for my other podcast. That was a long tangent, but back to the point. We humans are amazing at finding patterns. I don't even have to touch on how, the nature of ARGs, the nature of how every game is a matter of patterns. Whether it is problem solving or memorization, we look for patterns, we recognize them, and we act on them. It is an inherent part of our human nature to look for patterns. So I don't think it's inherently bad for people who enjoy fiction to look at it and go, oh, that thing, this character doing this thing, that happens a lot in fiction. We should give that a name so we can point it out. I think that's legitimately fine. I don't want to step on anybody's fun. My particular issue when it comes to writing, again, is that it boils on writing to a system of patterns and a system of attaching quality and morality to things without ignoring the context. Cliches and tropes are all about content, what happens, not context, why it happened. Not every time queer people die in a story is bury your gays. Most of the time it is, especially when it's for the character development of another character, usually the main character, but it's not always. So just because a queer character is dying in fiction is not inherently bury your gays. As a queer person, this subject is very keen to my heart, and it's a sort of thing where it's like, sometimes, a lot of the time, I get questions from friends, from, fellow queer writers, and they express their concerns, Is it bury your gays? If the main character dies, is it still bury your gays? And the very fact that we're having this conversation, well, we're ignoring context for content, especially when, it's being made by a queer author who very much clearly is close to the subject and knows what they're talking about. But in spite of that, oh man, I could do a whole video about that. Wait, I did. Anyhow, without spoilers in here, there is one scenario, and my lovely partner, my favorite person in the whole world, the smartest girl I know, Kitty, pointed out that there is one scenario in which tropes can indeed be helpful for writing. And I, being level headed and being able to notice things and know myself very well, I can say that if you want to play with tropes, it is absolutely fine to look at them. It is absolutely fine to look at them, see what they're talking about, and say, well, what if I did this instead? What if I did this other thing? What if I twisted this? What if I meshed this? What if I made things different? And I'm absolutely okay with that. One, because you're playing with expectations. And two, because you're not just looking at tropes and cliches as the rule, which they're not. You're looking at them as launch pads, as points of inspiration, as points to begin from. If there is a trope about this thing, well, I'll make my story not about that. And since my story is not about that, it has to be about this. And then you move on from there. You have this whole development of ideas that spring from a negative. Instead of having this, my story will not have this. And that's fine. That's cool. My one concern is mostly that every time that I've gone to TV tropes, I've lost hours of my life. Hours that I could have spent writing. And honestly, being entirely honest with you, finding stories is not particularly hard. And I'm not saying that in a sort of like big-headed, kind of like, I'm gonna prove you wrong kind of way. But as you know, from someone who, did hundreds of prompts, made a whole book about prompts, and does, writing prompt exercise videos, you find story ideas everywhere. I have a whole notepad full to the brim with story ideas and single sentences, and you're gonna hear one of them today. So it's a sort of thing where if you want to go and hunt for ideas in TV tropes, that's fine. You do you. Again, I wouldn't do that because I always lose like 5 hours of my time. And if I had to have hours of my life vanish, I would rather it be playing Stardew Valley. There you go. Please check off your bingo cards. Max mentioned Stardew Valley on a video. So to make sure that I did not completely overlook the question, I need help in regards of cliches. When to avoid them? Most of the time. When to utilize them? Sometimes. How do you know the difference? I just don't touch cliches, usually. Again, I lose time on TV tropes. How can you twist cliches into something cool? By doing negatives. Acknowledge the content of a cliche. In the case of offensive ones, acknowledge why they're offensive and why they're harmful and why you shouldn't have them. But in the case of the less harmful ones, the ones that are just theme-based, consider why, and negatives. What if my story didn't have this? What if instead of the antagonist doing that thing antagonists do, they did something else? That right there, I like that. And of course, Kitty, being the smartest person I know, pointed that out. That that process of negatives is a bountiful wealth of story possibilities. So that I cannot take away from anybody. I hope that answer was insightful, and I hope that if anything I said something funny and I made you laugh at least once. As for the next question, I just got this one like today, and I recently had a video talking about online harassment and what authors can do to mitigate that. If you want the quick footnotes version, don't quote people, don't reply to it. Agitators want you to be agitated, so don't let them agitate you. Focus on you, focus on what you need to do, and minimize your social media footprint. I just recommend deleting your Facebook, but that's just because Facebook. The question, and I'm going to read the whole thing, goes a little bit like this. I appreciate the advice you have given here. I am terrified of creating any art for mass/public consumption because of the risk of online harassment and the way that people interact with creators on social media. My first instinct is to throw myself into anonymity behind layers of pseudonyms, but I am afraid of being tracked down and or being unable to gain a large enough following because I'm being anonymous. I have seen your Q&A where you discuss pen names, but do you have any advice about using anonymity as a strategy against trolling, or advice about anonymity and audience building? I thought a lot about this question before deciding whether I wanted it to be in this episode or not. And I think that we can touch on several things here, and I think it's a great chance to talk about it. I think going fully anonymous just to prevent, or to seemingly prevent trolling and online harassment, I think that is a little short-sighted. And I'm not saying that to be mean to you, but it's a sort of thing where, especially, if you know the process, because I'll tell you this right now, when the day comes that you publish a book, and you send it out to an agent, and the agent sends it out to a publishing house, or even if you decide to just publish independently, somewhere you have to put in your real name. And the best example of this is that if you want to send your book to the copyright offices, so that you actually have proof that you hold the copyright to your book, which is something that everyone has to do eventually, even if you are anonymous, ultimately anonymous doesn't make you absolutely anonymous. Like, anonymous just becomes your pen name in that particular scenario. I don't know, because I actually thought about it and I actually researched a little bit. I don't even know what you would have to do to become fully anonymous, because somewhere down the road, the money trail will just, lead back to you eventually. So I don't think going full anonymous is even possible, especially, in the world that we live in. But even before that, I don't even think that it would be worth it. I think that you don't have to go absolute anonymous. I think, honestly, that a clean slate, a pseudonym is fine, especially if you don't like your name. Like, I feel like I have to clarify this again. Any name that is not your real name, the one on your driver's license or ID, then it's a pen name. J.K. Rowling's name is not J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling is a pen name that she uses that happens to be very similar to her real name. So that is why, back in the day when I first started, I looked at my real name and I thought, well, if I want to shave off one of the two last names, because I'm from Mexico where everybody has two last names, and two last names seemed a little hard to fit on a book cover, being entirely honest. And I thought, well, I'll shave one of them off. And then I reached for advice, and the person that was helping me was like, well, then that becomes your pen name. And I'm like, well, if I'm already going to have a pen name, I might as well make it something really cool, and something that I really like, and something that fits what I like aesthetically. So, listen, you don't have to go full anonymous. My setup is this, okay? My plan for you is this. My roadmap for you is this. Clean slate, new email accounts, new two-step verification, make new accounts on the places you want to be. For the sake of your productivity, pick one or two at most social media outlets and post in those two regularly under this new pseudonym. Be very mindful. I would almost say do not share your location. Do not share real details about yourself. I would urge you against directly friending / connecting with people who know you in real life, especially people who might hand out that information without thinking twice. Unless you have a circle of friends who you trust and you have been very clear with, then it's fine. But what I'm getting at is to create not a persona, because it's still you. Unless you want it to be a persona, that's fine. Create this new pen name, this new you, and have absolute control over the data that the internet has on you. If you don't have a Facebook page, most of that stuff is already gone. Because Facebook, as we all know, is a little sticky, and even just geotagging your images can be a risk. That's why I urge you to not geotag your images. And I know what someone's thinking. No matter what you do, someone's gonna find you. And I don't particularly like that. One, because, again, we're writers, we're not Taylor Swift. I don't think anyone is gonna be going after you. And take it from me, I've been doing this for a long while, and I can tell you, every single piece of harassment that I've gotten has been just one-offs, has just been people saying mean things to agitate me. Most harassment on the internet is agitation. They want you to be angry, they want you to quit, and I hate the fact that those people win a lot, and I really despise that. But ultimately, those people just want you to quit. And as I said in that video, I am fantastic at doing things out of spite. So I just don't mention those people. I mute them. I don't block them, because if you block them, they know you block them and they win. So mute them, go on with your life, and keep on creating, because that's the thing that you want to do. And in spite of whether they like it or not, you're going to keep doing your thing, because what's life if not about doing the things you want to do? But also, this is something that I didn't bring up in the video. I didn't bring this up because I didn't want to give an example, but I'll give it here. One of the people I remember who said some really messed up things to me, but I think it was back on Tumblr. I think it was on Tumblr. They said some really, really gross things, and I knew, and I learned that day that I did the right thing by not publishing their ask, by not blowing it up, because right after, not right after, let's say like an hour after they sent that gross message, they sent another one going, "Oh, I thought you answered questions. Did you get my message? I thought you answered questions on your blog." And then I knew. They were like, "Hey, did you read the message that I wrote with gross things? You should go read it. If you haven't gotten that notification, you should go read it now." And I knew. All they want is to see that they had an effect on you. And that was really petty. That was like super petty. Yeah, it's like, hey, I sent you a death threat. Have you read it? I put a lot of work. I put some of my best work there, you know? I put a lot of my best work on that threat, and I really want to make sure that you read it. It's petty. It's there to agitate you. So, to wrap up, because the question was, again, what were my thoughts on using anonymity as a strategy against trolling and harassment on the internet? And I think it is not worth your time. I honestly think that you're better off making a completely new pen name, or if you haven't posted anything, you get full freedom. You get to do the thing that nobody gets to do, in which you get to look at all of the places you're going to make a username in, and you get to pick the one that you really want, the one that no one's taken on all the social media platforms, or at least the ones you want to use. That is so good. I'm not saying I wish I could change my Twitter handle to mKaren, because I like Mr. Karen, but it's the sort of thing where, like, I'm too late to the party. I can't change it. I have 5 years worth of videos, but you, dear viewer / listener, you get to decide. You get to have all of your profiles have the same name. That is awesome. And if you're feeling like dropping some monies, you can even set up a website. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. I recommend begin a new identity, a new persona. Post. Be mindful of geotagging your photos, of your location. Disable as much of that as possible. Have control. Because again, this is all about data. The data that you give to the internet, the data that you give to people and to strangers. And to the strangers who might, maybe, if you get really, really big and they really, really don't like you, might use it against you. But again, like, I don't think it's reasonable. That sounds mean. I don't think it's the right thing to make a whole contingency plan to base your entire career because of something that might never happen. Think about it. Don't live your life in fear. Enjoy life, tell stories, make good art. That right there. Because I feel that even if you attempt to do full anonymity, you're still going to be unhappy because you're going to be afraid of the day when that comes. And that's no way to live. I don't think so. I would be happier if you just created a new persona. Did not attach your real name. Never enter your real name in any of those things. Never enter your real address. Be mindful of geotagging, and then you'll be set. I actually recommend it, even if you're not afraid of that, like to anybody out there who's worried about like, I'm gonna have my debut, pen names, personas, do that. It's not like, hi, I'm an author, insert real name, but rather, hey, I'm M. Karen, and I write books for a living, and I drink coffee, and I eat veggies, and I love combination tempura. Stuff like that, you know? Okay. I hope that helped. And I hope that, if anything, I gave you another point of view. If you're interested in sending questions, you can drop them in the comments of these videos. I just realized that I don't have an email account sorted out for stuff like this. You can post your questions on my YouTube comments over at youtube.com/MrKirin. That is MISTREKIRIN. And of course, you can just tweet at me at Mr. Kirin. That is twitter.com/MISTREKIRIN. Mr. Kirin. That's me. Now, don't be leaving. Don't be finishing your walk yet. You're not done walking your cat just yet. We have one more segment. A little bit of an inspirational bit. As the saying goes, Snake, it's not over yet. We have the last segment of the show, the inspirational writing exercise bit. I have a hook for you. I have a plot twist basically for you. And I want to know, in the comments of this video or on Twitter or anywhere, wherever you are, just at me and let me know, because I want to know what you make with this. And if you tell a whole story, if you actually write this story, I would like to read it. I didn't say this in the previous videos, but I'll say this right now. This is kind of like, if you have known me forever, you already know, but if you're new, I should clarify. All of the story ideas that I present in these segments are up for grabs. Modify them, twist them, change them, make them fun, make them about you. If you could tell any story, if you could create a story based on this, a story without worrying about genre or target audience or how successful or unsuccessful it might be, about it being a bestseller or an award-winning short story or novel or novella, if you could make anything, what would you make? Today's prompt, I don't have a fancy name for it. I have quite literally for you, I just have the line of text that I wrote on my notepad. I had a revelation a few days back. I was thinking about a trope in fiction that I disliked a lot. And yes, I can know about tropes without looking at TV tropes. It's stuff that permeates through fiction. And there was one way to solve problems in fiction that is right up there with Deus Ex Machina and time travel that appears out of nowhere. And that, maybe we won't touch on that just yet. Maybe let's not spoil where it came from first. The story idea goes a little bit like this. If you're interested in writing, grab pen and paper, you do you. But for most of you, I want you to think about this story. I want you to think about what you would do, how you would tell the story. It's not so much an exercise of just, hey, sit down and write for 10 minutes, though it can be. It's more an exercise on getting you to think about writing, to get out of your head. Because I bet you've been working. I bet you've been in the car. You're probably in your commute right now. You probably just came back from school. You might just be washing dishes or walking your cat. And I'm not saying you should be thinking about stories all the time. But sometimes, as writers, all we need is to see something out in the corner of our eye, something we hadn't seen before, something we don't know just quite what it is, to find a story idea. And today I'm going to give you something, just off the corner of your eye. And I want to know what you would do. I almost have the plot twist set up in my mind. But this is the sort of thing where every writer is different, and every writer, like every chef, brings a part of themselves to the process. And I want to know what you would do. Without any more preamble, because I love to talk in great lengths, the sentence I wrote is this: everybody hates me, and I don't know why. I pictured a character. Their gender is not important. The time they live in, the era, is not important either. It can be a magical world, it can be the future, it can be now. That doesn't matter to me. This character, I always picture them being young, but they could be old. That's fine. This young person is a part of a community of people. A neighborhood, a corporation, a kingdom. And everybody in that community hates them. We're not talking about full-on abuse, though it could be, depending on how you handle the story. Everybody dislikes this character, and it feels as though it's unearned. It feels uncalled for. It feels unfair. And in my mind, I always imagine the story from the point of view of that character. Everybody hates them. Varying levels of hate, of course, because it's a community, and the character, who in my mind I keep referring to as the kid is still around. I mean, they're not kicking them out. They're not abusing them. But nobody likes them. Nobody does them any favors. Nobody allows them to be friends with anybody. And as I'm talking right now, I want you to think, what is the reason for this? Why does everybody dislike this person? And I know I said kid, but it doesn't have to be a kid. Another mental image that I've had was a bit of an older person. An older person and a younger generation around them. But in spite of that, what is the reason for this treatment? Why is everybody this way? And why can't anyone give a straight answer? Now, the prompt here is not so much about an answer, because you have the answer. Everybody hates this character. The key here is the question. Why do they hate the character? So you could say we're working on a plot twist in reverse. Now, this approach to a story idea or a story beat is very reminiscent, and remind me to bring this up in a future video. It's reminiscent of the way that Japanese game writer Yoko Taro tackles his stories. I believe he calls it reverse photography, or storytelling in reverse photography. But I will talk about that in another episode. We have the end destination, which happens to be the beginning of the story, but stories don't begin on page 1. There's always past, there's a backstory. What happened that led to this? Now, I'm going to tell you what I thought I would do. And as you know me, I'm always writing every day. I'm always busy. I don't have time to write this story. So I'm going to tell you what I would have done. Now, the origin for this story. I was talking with somebody about ineffective storytelling. and particularly solutions to problems in storytelling that are cheap, usually because they come out of nowhere without any setup. I can assure you this is not about David Cage, I promise. And the examples that I brought up was Deus Ex Machina, The God in the Machine, a key of old myths in which to solve the problem, gods just show up and fix the problem, usually without any sort of setup. Another one is time travel, suddenly time travel. This is, of course, the Prisoner of Azkaban situation, which I think is the key as to why I really dislike that book. Not because time travel is present, but because it just comes out of nowhere. Yes, I know it was established, but not as well as it could have been. Also, time travel never comes back ever again in the Harry Potter franchise, which is absolutely a problem. If time travel is a thing you have in your world, the story should very much remember that. But anyhow, you know me, I love to ramble. The other way to solve problems was mind wiping. Just erasing a person's memory. Completely wiping them clean. If they're a bad person, they're no longer bad. I am saying that in a particularly funny voice because I completely disagree with that on a moral standpoint, but regardless of that, just wave a wand and the problem is solved. Put them in the machine and they forget everything. And I thought, like I always do, what would a story be like from the point of view of that person? The person who did something. It might have been attempting to destroy the world. It might have been attempting to enact justice for someone else. Keep in mind that everybody is the main character of their story, and heroes and villains don't exist. We're all just protagonists, and anyone who stands in your way is an antagonist. And virtue does not always go hand in hand with selflessness. Just saying. And I thought, well, what about a story where this character did something horrible? They did something so bad that the solution was to wipe their memory. And I immediately did what I always do, and you know me very well. I thought of the repercussions, and I thought of the worst possible thing that could feasibly happen from this. And imagine that. Imagine. We have wiped the kid's memory clean. They will not do that horrible thing ever again. That thing that endangered the entire world and our community and everything we know and care for. But that doesn't change the people around them. That doesn't mend the broken heart of that woman who lost her husband and that man over there whose two children died in the cataclysm that was just barely averted. Those people don't change. Those people don't get their memories wiped too. They go on treating that person the same way they would have done before. The only difference is that the person who almost did this horrible thing doesn't know anything about it, doesn't remember it. They are clueless as to why everyone hates them. And in spite of having already paid the price for their crimes, they go on being punished. In the story that I came up with, everybody hated the kid because they had almost done something horrible that could have brought an end to the community. But that can't be the only reason. We're writers, full of boundless possibilities. And I do acknowledge that there are, how do I say this? There are more magical and less magical approaches to this whole situation. We can have a very grounded story, a story about racial differences, because I think it's incredibly likely and super understandable for a person who is a stranger to this culture and this community to be treated differently for no other good reason than them being different. The color of their skin, their religion, their culture, who they are. I feel like that's a really, I don't want to say easy, but a very straightforward way of telling that story. And a story that would still be effective, because stories are not just about plot twists and hooks. to me. Oh, feel free to get ready to mark that off your bingo tables. Stories for me are about character. I didn't begin this exercise thinking what would make an exciting story. I began this thinking about the bad storytelling in a trope, the bad storytelling in mind wiping, and I thought, well, how can this be more fun? And what if that story was told from the point of view of that person? What if we got to see their point of view? What would that story be like from the eyes of that character? That right there. It's not about magic. It actually isn't about the story hook. It's about what that character would do and how they would tackle the situation. How they would feel. And to show through their eyes this situation. That right there's fun. That's why I wonder what you would do. How would you tackle this particular story? Because it is true that even though I have given you the question and the answer, it was mind wiping in some sort of form, technology or magic, it doesn't matter. And that is the reason why everybody hates them, doesn't actually answer all of the situations. There are countless possibilities here. What was the cataclysm? What was this thing that was about to happen that almost brought an end to the community? Note that I never said the world. I said the community. Because not all stories have to be about the end of the world. They can just be about the end of this group of people. What was it going to be? Because we go from the kid was literally about to call upon a rain of fire and brimstone to the kid was going to tell everyone that we exist. It can be a community of people living in hiding, in secret. And suddenly, mind wiping a kid seems a lot more extreme, seems a lot less justified. And continuing to treat that child to almost abuse them because of something that they don't remember they did. Something that might not even have been their fault, or even something that was that big of a deal. It becomes more interesting. It becomes more fun. And here we go. It's the folding, almost origami in plot twists as you unfold the source of this. It's not just one thing, but another and another, and that's the fun in storytelling. I didn't sit down here with the story idea fully in my head. I sat down here with just that one sentence and the stuff that I imagined in between washing dishes, in between going out on my walks, in between listening to episodes of a podcast. And without realizing it, there's a story there. I don't think I'm going to touch it. I don't think I'm going to write it. Mostly because I'm very busy. And I have a really big, almost 400-page story that I have to finish before getting there. And I know that I'll find more stories. So if this story idea sounds exciting and fun, you should totally take it. You should write it. You should twist it. You should show me what you would make with this story. If you could tell any story. If you could make it anything. If you could make it yours. What would you make? Omakase shimasu. And so, welcome to the end of the very first podcast. This was very fun. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. And I hope that I gave you something fun. And I cannot wait to hear your feedback. I thought about this format a lot. I thought about it for a long time. And I hope that I did it justice. I hope that I made the best podcast. The most max podcast possible. But in spite of that, I am open to your feedback. I want to know what you have to say. I prefer longer podcasts because this would definitely be like a once a week kind of thing. So if you like the long format, if you prefer it if it was shorter, I am up to suggestions. I would love to hear what you have to say. Please let me know. I know And I know because some of you are really, really sweet and send me messages or just sometimes leave a comment that says, "Hey Max, I'm usually very quiet and I never post a comment, but I wanted to say that I really love this video." To all of you quiet ones in the back, if you could just tell me, even if you liked it, just tell me you liked it. Just so that I know, because in the internet, sometimes when you get feedback, it's usually negative feedback, and that can become very loud. If only one person sends me feedback, and that feedback is negative, that single feedback will affect the rest of the format. So if you really liked the way that this came out, and you really enjoyed certain segments, you should tell me. Just take a second. You don't have to write me a paragraph. I'm okay with that. Just tell me, "Hey Max, this was good," or "I like that part," and I'm set. Because the people who are going to get to decide what this podcast is going to sound like are going to be those who go out of their way to leave a message. Okay? Okay. And now, for a couple of things, before we do the big, enormous shout out to all of my patrons. If you want links to where this podcast lives, whether it is YouTube or iTunes or Patreon or wherever, there are links to all of those things in the description down below. There's a bunch of goodies down there. Especially on the YouTube version of this video. If you would like to support me in a way that is not Patreon related, you can buy me a cup of coffee in the link in the description down below. And of course, if you like the sound of my voice and would like to hear what I sound like when I'm screaming about video games and swearing a lot, you can go over to my other channel with my lovely, lovely partner Kitty. But of course, the easiest way to support me is to go to patreon.com/mkaren, pledge $1, you get to listen and watch all of the content I make at least a week in advance, and you get a shout out on this end screen. Just $1 is all it takes. And now, I would like to offer a formal apology to all of the people whose names I am about to butcher. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart to Alyssa Dudley, Amanda Stevens, Amy Palmer, Aniexo Hoshi, Biting the Sun, this one's a funny one, Blarg, C.E. Richards, Caitlin, Cannibal Lily, Carriette Eccleston, Kathy Lindsay, Christiane, Christine Dennis, Kristen Lofton, Citro, Clem Pastor, Carissa Glasheen, Dwayne Jackson, Eleanor. I mean, really, all the Metal Gear references I make are actually meant for Eleanor, not for you, but you can enjoy them as well if you like. Geoffrey, Heather Tusker, Janosch Hebutsky, Jeffrey James William, Juan Nunes, K.M. Anderson. Oh god, help me. Kameshwar Rao Shaluri. That didn't feel right. Anyhow, Kylie, Kelly Vermillion, Keel, Kit Lee, Lier Killo, Lissa Effa, Marco Lucatelli, Mary Foster Smith, Nicole Grissom, Noam Sohar, Novels and Tomes, Pablo, Raquel Fernandez, Roa, Shimmer Tales, Sky D. White, Sylvia Lightilla, Thomas Baker, and Wendy Christopher. Thank you so much for your support, you guys, and here we are at the end of it all. I hope that this first podcast was fun. I had a lot of fun recording it, and I hope my Japanese was fine. I mean, it's easier for me to speak Japanese because Japanese and Spanish, my native tongue, have the same phonetic system. So for me, like, Japanese has always felt very natural, so I'm just like, yeah, omakase. I apologize if it didn't come out as right. Please let me know and I will fix it, I promise. But the one thing for me is that even now as it's finishing, I don't want it to be over because I'm having so much fun, but it feels right. And that's the thing, that I haven't felt this way in a long time. I liked the videos that I made. I really did. But because of complications and my life is gonna get really hectic, I wanted to try something different. And this was really fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I want to hear what you have to say. But I have to end the call. I have to let you guys go. So for now, thank you for listening. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. And no matter what happens, no matter what you do, I hope that you remember the thing I told you, the thing I always say. Dear writerly friend, today is a good day to write.